Okay, I'm going to let Rob, feel free to respond to anything that Dave indicated or to any of the other issues that have been discussed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my friend Tom Coburn and John Klein for the spirit of conversation which they offered and try to carry that forward a little bit. The President asked at the beginning of this, what ideas do we share about cutting costs? And Tom, I think you had some very good ones. Fraud, that the President has a proposal that says we should have a database. If you've committed fraud against Medicare once, you can't make a contract again. Wellness, there's a lot of good ideas in the bills. Junk lawsuits, I think that there's what Secretary Sebelius is doing is very important in curtailing that. And then the President asked the question about whether we can find agreement on pooling the purchasing power of small businesses and individuals so they can get the same deal that big companies and members of Congress get. And my friend John Klein talked about the Association Health Plan proposal. Respectfully, John, I think that what you're talking about with association health plans and what we're talking about with exchanges is a semantic difference. It's a matter of pooling the purchasing power of small businesses and individuals to get a better deal. But there is one substantive difference that I want to ask about because we are concerned about it. If we can resolve this, I think we could agree. Let's take the case of a woman who has a baby by C-section. And she lives in one of the many states that say you can't be kicked out of the hospital after you've had a C-section until your doctor thinks it's time for you and the baby to go home. Now, under the Association Health Plan proposal, that rule wouldn't apply to that lady and her baby, that there would be no protection of her in that situation. We think, John, that there shouldn't be necessarily 51 different rules for each state, but there ought to be some minimum federal standards in these exchanges to protect people in cases like that. So I think the issue is if we could find a way to agree that in a case like this where a lady has a baby by C-section and has the ability to not have the insurance company get between her and her doctor, so the doctor makes a decision about when they go home, we could figure this out. And how do you feel about that?
If I could just respond to that, my friend knows very well that there are large companies today who operate under what I'm proposing for association health plans. They get a waiver. They don't have to comply with the individual mandates of all 50 states. And I don't hear people complaining about the insurance policies that they're getting from their big companies. In fact,
we do.
Many of those now would fall into what we've been calling Cadillac plans because they provide very excellent service. So I think that, frankly, is a red herring. And I think that you're not going to have adequate coverage if you have an association health plan that's working under the same rules as a large company.
But John, would you favor a standard that says they have to do something like that, or would we just leave it up to the insurance company?
I would say that we put the association health plans in exactly the same position that large companies are today, with exactly the same rules under ERISA.
See, with all respect, we don't agree with that. We don't agree with the idea that the insurance company should get to make that kind of decision about whether the lady goes home Thursday or Sunday. Now, I don't think that's intrusive. I think that makes common sense. But if we could find a way to bridge that gap, and I think we could, then I think the AHPs that you support aren't all that different than the exchanges that we do, and I would think that would be a common ground.
Good. This has been a useful conversation. Paul Ryan wants to make a comment.
Can I just interject one quick point here, very quick, just in terms of trying to keep everything fair, which I know you want to do. To this point, the Republicans have used 24 minutes, the Democrats 52 minutes. Let's try to have as much balance as we can.
I think the Republican leaders are controlling the time for the Republicans, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
I don't think that's quite right, but I'm just going back and forth here, Mitch. I think we're just trying to go back and forth, but that's okay. Paul, I was about to call on you, if that's all right. Go ahead.
All right, Rob, here's basically what we're looking at. The difference is this. We don't think all the answers lie in Washington regulating all of this. So the problem with the approach we're seeing that you're offering, which I do believe, Senator, is very different than what we're saying, is we don't want to sit in Washington and mandate all of these things. So what you're doing is you're defining exactly what kind of health insurance people can have. You're mandating them to buy this kind of health insurance. And so we simply say, look, if the National Restaurants Association or the National Federation of Independent Business, on behalf of their members, wants to set up an association health plan, We think they'll probably do a good job on behalf of their members. Let them decide to do that instead of restricting insurance competition by federalizing the regulation of insurance and by mandating exactly how it will work. You make it more expensive and you reduce the competition among insurers for people's business. We want to decentralize the system, give more power to small businesses, more power to individuals, and make insurers compete more. But if you federalize it, standardize it, and mandate it, you do not achieve that. And that's the big difference we have.
Would you yield? Mr. President, may I ask him to yield?
We're not in a formal hearing here,
Okay.
so go ahead.
Paul, I read your roadmap, and I thought one of the things that you said is that there should be some minimum consumer protections in the exchanges that you propose. Did I get that wrong?
And there are in every state. And so what we're simply saying is, look, lots of us have offered lots of different ideas. We've got dozens of Republican ideas offered in the House, in bills, in the Senate. And many of us look at the point of the fact that the states, do we distrust our governors? Do we distrust our state legislatures? Do we distrust all the state insurance? Yeah, okay, some of you may do that.
Depends on who it is.
But should we regulate all of this? Should people in Washington decide exactly how this works?